something that brings out the joy is the fact that I know I have to work to be superior.
Sometimes I just, sometimes I feel defeated enough to where I don't even deal with it.
There's an immense strength that we don't acknowledge in ourselves.
The joy is understanding, who I am and that I have choices.
And we don't figure out that we don't put it down until it's weighed us down to the point where it's killing us.
Hi, and welcome to Start a Conversation. My name is Dr. Shani Byard. I'm the owner of Message Media Education. We are a professional development training organization that teaches people to think critically about how media influences their perception of themselves and the way they see each other. Today we're going to talk about racism. We're going to jump in and explore. But first, let me introduce our guests. So let's start a conversation. Okay, so what we usually do at Message Media Education is operate within the framework called Afro-Media Literacy. And there's 3 stages that we'll go through. One stage is deconstruct. So we're going to talk and look at the ways to deconstruct the myths that racism and media perpetuate about Black women. The next stage is reconstruct. We're going to look at ways to rebuild, co-construct together the truth, the experience of who we actually are, how we contribute to society, and also our experiences navigating institutional racism. And then last is construct. And with that, we're going to be looking at ways that we can take part in eliminating, ending, dismantling in some way the institution of racism. Okay? So we want to look at and talk about how stereotypes from media impact our experiences. And I want to first pose 2 questions. How have you been impacted by media stereotypes? How have you been prejudged, essentially, by others?
I had a situation where I was supposed to spearhead a project to take care of something, and I was having a dialogue with a young white girl, about, taking responsibility in it and what, she needed to do. And she didn't want to talk to me at the time. And, so when people do that, I'm like, okay, so when can you do it? Just to set some boundaries and get some level of commitment. And she saw it as me being attacking. It was a perception issue. And then one of the other guys on the project, she talked to him about it, and another 20-something young white guy, and he told her, well, Sheila's African American, and African American women are really aggressive. And he said that to me.
In front of you?
He said that to me, that he explained, he was explaining away my behavior to her.
Got it.
And I'm like, really, dude?
Wow.
She needed to take responsibility. This was about her. This isn't about me. Right. I was so put off by it. I couldn't respond at the time. I had to respond later because I was so angry that I was being marginalized. And they didn't, and what happens is the fact that the girl wasn't willing to take responsibility never got dealt with, it never got acknowledged other than by me.
Media does shape, the way that we see ourselves, or our identities, and things that become normative and accepted in society to the point where a white male is actually going to come to you and explain to you and think that it's okay to explain to you that this is how Black women are, right? Isn't that the truth? So,
and I think that's interesting because the weight of that conversation, even though you did not set up that circumstance, we often have the responsibility to neutralize it. We have to step inside of ourselves and say, okay, I see what's happening here. I'm going to respond accordingly. It's almost there's not the luxury of I'm going to be Kyra, Akita, myself. I'm representing every Black woman. It's that, it's that feeling. And for me, whether it be when I was working corporate or when I moved into a career professionally as an actress, I always represent the exception. Oh, Kyra, you're so adorable. You're so great, and I know you're so approachable. You're so nice. You're so different.
So funny.
Because of so much of what the idea of what a strong or aggressive or whatever Black woman looks
Or
like.
what a Black woman looks like, period.
Right. I don't really fit that mold, and so I think it's interesting. The onus is on us, because when I get in those situations, whether it be work or on set. One of my most recognizable roles, I was in Tyler Perry's Why Did I Get Married. I played the baby mama. And so people are so confused when they meet me, because they're like, you're nothing like that. And I'm like, well, I'm an actor.
Right.
We act.
That is fiction.
But I think that when you take those moments to really have the conversation, that's where your personal identity comes into play. And when I am in those situations, for me, you may not think I'm like Shanika or whoever, whatever perception you've been created by media, but that's my sister. That's in my family. My family is originally from Southeast DC. It's all in there. It's all in there. So you're going to give her, by me being able to navigate that conversation and kind of call you out, but in a way that you don't feel threatened.
Exactly, attacked.
Attacked. I think there's something, you kind of hate that you have to shift and do that, but I think there's something very powerful in that, and I don't really approach it as a victim.
I think that sometimes, though, you do have to make someone feel threatened so that they get that message one time. You know what I mean? And I don't even necessarily mean physically threatened, but you need to know, like, don't come for me.
There's a check.
Again, and working as a high school teacher and remembering high school myself, with our culture, we're cool, like Black culture has always been cool. And so when someone's looking for the cool thing, who are they coming to? They're coming to us. And I think we have to shut that down. Like I went to a very diverse high school here in Los Angeles. However, whenever there was something that had to do with like Black coolness, they wanted to come to like the Black girls. And in my class of maybe 200, there were about 7 of us. But it was like, oh, can you braid my hair?
Girl,
Stop. And like, I know how to braid hair, but I was like, no, I don't know how, Or it was, hey, I heard this song. What does that lyric mean? I remember clearly it was a Jay-Z lyric where he said he can flip it 3 ways. And she said, now does that have to do with drugs, or what does that mean? Why?
Or pancakes.
Why? You know what I mean? Like, why do I know that? But I think that we have to, be the people to shut that down, because I see it every day in my school with my students. My little sister who's 16, like they feel like they have to be the brand ambassador for Black people. Like, you want to know about Black coolness? Come talk to me. No, don't. Like, how about you don't? And I think if you tell someone one time and kind of set your boundaries that I'm not here for your entertainment. I'm not going to physically harm you, but not again.
That's interesting, because what you say does require a certain consciousness level, a certain level of self-awareness, a certain level of self-knowledge about our history, about how we are painted. Young people in general, I won't even isolate young people. People in general may not have learned, had the opportunity to become aware. There's a level of consciousness that needs to be put in place in order to provide that check, that you mentioned. So, and sometimes we don't have that, right? As women, and we end up replicating. Right, what we are told we are.
That's why I love that, with the way media is today, we have an environment where we can, you can speak your mind, you can create your own content, and you can say to a mass, this is not necessarily true. We're also like this, we're also like that, and that's what was so interesting to me with the unwritten rules, was being able to say it in a funny, way, because I feel like people will understand humor, and they'll laugh about it and be like, that's so true, and, and then they can move on from it. You can have a conversation about it and not feel like it's a really scary place. That's why, I'm so glad that Kim's doing this show, because it's about dialogue. It's about, speaking your mind and letting people know how you feel, and then, they'll be on the internet and they'll say their piece, and then someone will get to them and be like, well, that ain't true, but at least we're talking about it, not in our little separate bubbles, just perpetuating the same little stories in our little, packed places. Now we're actually like, we're more worldly.
As a Black woman in entertainment, have you had to deal with stereotypes at all?
I feel like I've been so lucky because like even I did an episode of Criminal Minds last year, and I feel like my character could have been anyone, any color, you know, and those are my favorite roles. And I don't know if I'm lucky or if I just happen to get those type of roles. I just feel like I don't feel stereotyped in the characters that I've played, and I don't know if it's because of the way I come across, or I do try to go in for the baby mamas and I don't get them because it's just, I don't know, I guess I should be a better actor, but I don't know if this, I feel really blessed in the roles that I've been able to play, and even with the unwritten rules is probably the most I've ever tackled racism in any of my roles, so yeah, it's interesting.
I'm sitting here and everyone's talking and I'm thinking, I do realize that I guess I sort of inherently fight against a particular stereotype and like whatever projects that I'm gonna do or be a part of. And it could be in part my type A personality, but I'm always like, I need it to be tight. I need it to be together because I don't want someone to be like, oh, Black people ain't got they together. Like and that is subconsciously always in my mind of putting my best foot forward. And it's, as you said, like we all evolve, and I did sort of finally get to a place where I'm allowed to make mistakes. I'm allowed to not have it together at all times. And just sort of, and just be Crescent, whoever Crescent is that day. Like you said, we representing different spaces. Like I can be my corporate self, I can be my academic self, I can also go home and be in my hood and shed all that stuff. And it's like, you know, being in a different space, like who am I going to be today? And I'm like, I'm going to be Crescent, so whatever is coming out, But it took a minute to get there. But that's always in my mind is, where am I? What am I putting forward?
Right. It's interesting how we have to carry those multiple identities due to just our existence, you know, in America. I want to touch on one other piece because what Asha was saying actually, you know, speaks to this idea of colorism. And I really want to just give us a moment to just really be honest about that. Colorism is the result of systemic practices and media messages that reinforce the belief that lighter is better than darker. And it tends to become subconscious. So I want to speak to colorism and our experiences with colorisms because there's also privileges attached to that. I just want to kind of address that and have us, you know, share what that experience has been, if you've been in that experience at all.
I think when we talk about racism, I think a lot of times we fail just because it's uncomfortable to talk about taking accountability for like our part in it and perpetuating these things, because anytime I've ever faced any kind of colorism issues, it was from us, you know what I mean? And especially guys, you know, like it was always like, you're such a pretty dark-skinned chick, you know, like all the time. Or it was, you're pretty for a Black girl, right? Like I heard that from Black people. As you said, the light skin struggle, like one of my best friends, she said that she was a waste of light skin by other Black people because she didn't have good hair. You know what I mean? And that's a whole nother issue that we have. We can go on.
I can relate to that.
And so I'm going to table that conversation, but I think again, but before we, you know, go on about colorism and the privileges therein, because we know that the media is not controlled by us, and so that issue is outside of us. However, it's very much within, and I think a lot of it happens with females and with women because we're allowing men to throw that on us. And again, it does come from the original system.
Right.
Absolutely recognize that, but we are perpetuating it daily, and it's
Which
really
is,
sad.
to add to that, another implication of navigating, you know, white supremacy, right? Eurocentric systems that have been made as white as superior. When you operate within that as a byproduct, we internalize that stuff within our culture.
I had an experience with that years ago when my ex-husband and I were preparing to move to Barbados. There was a grocery store we used to shop at, and then we had our little cheese lady that we always talked to, and she was a beautiful dark-skinned woman. I'm saying she's dark-skinned for the story. We told her, you know, we won't be seeing you anymore. We're getting ready to move. And where are you going? We're going to Barbados. And she was like, oh my God, you're going to be in all that sun and ruin your beautiful light skin. And we were both like, You know, jaw dropping, because like, how does she feel about herself if she thinks that what I have is better? And I never felt, you know, I didn't have the good hair. I had the light skin, and not the good hair. You know, I was a waste of the light skin. You know,
What I always found interesting were the categorization. So my family, and now it's funny in hindsight, I'm like, I feel so blessed to have been raised in an environment in which I was raised, literally covers the spectrum. Literally covers it. So,
which most of our families do.
For myself, growing up, I went in and out of different categories, if you will, in terms of like the scale, because during the summer I'd be in the sun, and I literally was like 5 shades darker. And when I got ready to go to school, I went to Boston. There's no sun in Boston, like for like maybe a month. And so I became a little lighter skinned, if you will. And so for the first time, I was referred to as the light skinned girl with long hair. And I was like, are you talking to me? Because in my head, I look this way. But for other people, they're like, no, you're over here with this camp. And I'm like, but I'm not. Right. but I am, but I'm not. But you know what I'm saying? Because we're all in this together, really. Right. So this whole conversation about it was still, it took me a long time to just sort of not be dismissive of it and just to understand, okay, some people have had these different experiences and they've internalized them, and now I have to deal with your stuff.
I think that's interesting what you're saying about kind of dealing with our own self internally. I think that's such the tricky place that we're in, especially now because everyone is so connected. We want to feel that we're progressive and that we're diverse and that we don't see color, which don't get me into that. I can't stand that because I think we should, because different cultures bring something different to the table. It's just that when you put a certain lesser value on what I bring to the table, that's when something goes wrong. Exactly. But I love the uniqueness. I mean, I remember I didn't know it at the time because it's all I knew growing up in Germany. I was there from the time I was 4 to 16. Wow. And I didn't know until I came to the States, or I would visit, family in DC. I had no concept of that. They thought Black women were the most just amazing thing. Wow. Like they just doted on me and my sister. So I'm like, we're fabulous. I had no idea. I love it. So I think this idea that, yes, it's like we have to have this conversation internally also, but we're also in this space where we have so much trauma that we haven't had any time to even figure it out. We're just trying to like survive and get through. Yeah. And even if you separate the trauma of race, you have naturally from generations, depending on where you're from, the personality of your parents, what they've been through, you already have that baggage. And then now we have the racism back. So you can have a young dark girl who feels this sort of way. Well, not all of that is tied up into racism. Some of that is personal identity of her mother. Like it's so many different things, and we don't have the luxury to like breathe and figure that shit out. I'm sorry.
We don't know what our culture is. We don't know the history. How can we even embrace a culture or a concept of personal identity in a society that wants you to constantly want to be something other than who you are?
So many choices of things that you can watch, and that's the power that you have. You can create your own reality.
They're not seeing enough of those images, and what can we do to kind of make them, we're not cool enough right now, and we're losing.
We are able to put our own content together fairly easily. You can put it out there as, we also have this.
We can't expect the power that pretty much created our trauma to heal it.